In this box is the Okinos Aqua 6 Infinity case, and I'm going to be reviewing it today. Now, heads up, I did get sent this by Okinos, however, all these thoughts are my own independent thoughts on the case. So let's get into it. Now, before I've even taken it out of the box, I would like to note that this is an 85 Australian dollar case, which is around 55 American dollars. And it's an ATX full-size case with a fish tank design, and that is really impressive at this price point. And that is a pretty clean looking case. Now, you can see that it's got a fish tank design, so you've got the glass on the front and side panel, and it's actually quite a nice transition. Now, popping off the side panels is really easy. All you do is just pull at the side and it just clips out just like that. Then it's the same for the front panel. So it's really nice and easy to access inside the case. Now, inside the case, we've got 3 ARGB Infinity fans with that infinity glass mirror on the inside. These two are reverse blade fans, so you don't actually see the backing of the fan, which is really nice, especially on a budget case. And then this one's just a normal RGB fan. Now, inside the case, you can see that we've got a nice wide space for our motherboard. However, what I will note is that these standoffs are actually quite close to the edge for the cables here. So what will happen is, if you're installing an ATX motherboard that is wide like this, it may hang over that a little bit, and it might make the cable tucking a little bit harder around this bend. But overall, it's not like other cases such as the Thermaltake 170 Plus, where it is clearly going to overhang. If you want to see that video about the Thermaltake case, you can check it out. But yes, this case is definitely better in its design, as it'll probably just cut off there, whereas on the Thermaltake case, all these holes and cutouts were completely blocked off if you did use a wide motherboard. As you can see on this diagram here, Okinos also does clearly make it so that you can see that it's going to overhang the gap for the cable cutout. So that's pretty good. I'm glad that they're transparent about that. On the top of the case, we've also got support for a 360mm AIO, which is a nice touch. Turning our attention to the front I/O, we can see that we've got a headphone microphone combo jack here, a USB-C port. I believe it's USB-C 3.2, which is actually quite nice. It's going to be high speed and probably a high wattage. And we've got 2 USB ports, USB-A ports, and then our power button on the side and our reset switch here. This is just foam, which means that we've got this kind of cool looking infinity look to it. Now obviously you can see the backing there, but when you lift up the camera and you're looking at it like that, it looks like it's kind of floating. So that's actually kind of a cool design. And then we've got this nice little walnut finish there with the Okinos logo on it. Turning our attention to the back of the case, it's nothing too special, it's pretty normal. You've got all your PCI slot covers. Nice thing about these is they're actually the unscrewable ones, not the pull-out ones, tabs that you have to break off, so you can definitely replace them. Then on the back, we've got a cutout for our fans, which are bringing in airflow. And what's actually nice about this is that the fans actually do line up with the cutout. There's not like kind of this odd lineup, which sometimes I see on cases like these. So that's really well done, Okinos. To take the back panel off, all you do is unscrew these 2 screws, slide it back, just like a normal case. Now, in terms of cable management, I'm not seeing too many great options. There are a lot of tie-down points, however, the gap between this and the back panel is quite thin. So if you're a first-time builder, it might be a little bit harder, but I think you should get by. Then taking a look at the power supply basement, there's actually plenty of room here. So you can fit a pretty beefy power supply in here. And then you have plenty of room to dump some extra cables if you need some more room. However, yes, I do think that cable management is probably going to be a little bit difficult on this case. In the accessories pack, there's not really anything too special. Just some screws and some cable ties. But there's actually a fair few cable ties, so that's good. Now, another good thing about this case is actually the use of ARGB fan connectors. Now, it's not like a Molex connector like you'd also find on some other budget and cheap cases. So this is something that is pretty good about this. Definitely a good point from Okinos. Now, in terms of drive support, you can fit 2 3.5-inch hard drives down here, or you can put 1 2.5-inch drive on top, and I imagine you can probably just fit another one just down in there, but I don't think it would have any support. You'd actually just have to sit it down there. So only really room for 1 2.5-inch SSD, unless I've missed something elsewhere. So it's not the best in terms of drive compatibility, but again, it is an $85 case. Now I'm going to build a PC in the case and let you know how it goes. I won't show you the process, but if I run into any hiccups, I'll let you know. Overall, the PC case looks really cool. Now, ignoring the fact that I'm using a CV450 from Corsair from a while ago, it really looks good and the system really comes to life. The RGB LED fans are really nice and really well made, and for a matter of fact, this fan is from Thermalright. It's got the same infinity look, and the color matching seems to be almost identical, so they must be using some similar OEM, which means that you can easily find a pairing for these fans if you can't buy them from Okinos. So that's pretty cool in my opinion. Of course, you can change the color of the LEDs to be whatever you like. I prefer white. And yeah, it is a really cool looking build. I really like this case, to be honest. And at 85 Australian dollars, it's a really good value. The fans also aren't too loud in my opinion, so that's a good feature too. Now, one thing I was kind of disappointed with was the fact that with the side panel, you can see that we've got these little tabs that fit into the case here. Except because these are so recessed, it actually makes it really hard for the tolerance to fit with the side panel. You can see that there's actually quite a large gap on this metal beam here that stretches across here, and that makes it kind of hard to install in the case. So I'll just try and show you. If I try to install it in the case, I really have to push inward, and then sometimes the tolerance messes up at the top, but that time was actually pretty easy. It's a very small issue, but one to be noted, of course. Again, nothing inherently wrong with that, but that's just an issue that I personally came across. Now, my last complaint for the case is actually cable management. As I was mentioning before, there's not much room. But to be honest, I think I actually did quite a good job in terms of managing the cables. So I am using a SATA SSD, which makes it a little bit harder. And I am using a SATA RGB controller. But honestly, I think the cable management is pretty good. I definitely think that if you're using cable extensions, you're really going to struggle in this case. And even I found that putting a side panel on in this case with some bulk at some points in the cables was quite difficult. However, it wasn't hard. It wasn't overly hard and it was doable. And overall, the cable tie down points are pretty good and pretty well placed. I like how it's running all the way along here and all the way up here and even up here. But yes, you may struggle to fit some cables in, especially if they're big, bulky cable extensions. So if you're planning on using cable extensions, would probably recommend another case. However, if not, and you're just using the black cables, you can definitely do it in this. And even if you are using cable extensions, you can probably still get away with it, but it's going to be kind of tough to put on the side panel. But overall, pretty good. You can definitely see that some cables do stick out when the side panel's not on, and it's not like I'm using the biggest cables in the world either. Not the biggest issue, but putting us on a side panel is pretty hard. Now let me just show you what it takes to put on the side panel. So I always line up the hooks first, regardless of whatever case I'm using, and then just try and push in and then slide. Now that was pretty easy. I've definitely had some more issues in the past with it, but it fits on and slides on. So yeah, not the best, not the worst, pretty good overall. And that's going to do it for this video. This case is definitely one that I'd recommend. Thank you again to Okinos for sending it out. These were my independent thoughts again. And yeah, I did like the case overall. Yeah, I could definitely recommend it for budget builders. Only thing is cable management. It's going to be a little bit harder. But to be honest, if you can sacrifice the cable management and just put a little more time in, it's definitely worth it for a case that looks this good. It definitely competes well with things like the Thermaltake View 170, and yeah, it's a good competitor to that. So if you're interested in that, this is a good alternative if you can't get access to that. Anyways, that's going to do it for this video. As always, like, subscribe. I'm TechBiz, and I'm out.